Hi, everybody, and welcome to this very special edition of the Noon Book Club, where we are incredibly excited to have Kathryn Stockett with us, author of this brilliant new book, which a lot of you probably won't have heard about yet, but you're going to love, called The Calamity Club. And this book, which you probably do know, which is The Help, which has sold millions of copies, was published 17 years ago. And this is Kathryn's first book since, this is her first book since The Help. So we're going to be chatting about this today. We're thrilled to have her join us from America, from the Deep South. So Kathryn, welcome to Noon.
Hi, Eleanor. Thank you so much for having me. I'm uh, here in Mississippi, and it's already starting to get hot.
I'm sure it is. So you must be so excited. This is your first your first big book since The Help, which I believe you published 17 years ago. It was your first book?
That's right, 17 years ago. The Help was my first. This is my sophomore novel. And yeah, it's been an interesting ride I've been on the last 17 years. Um, I uh, I think I think the thing that took me so darn long is probably part kind of paralysis, fearing that I might not be able to write a book that people would be, I don't know, interested in, satisfied with, and also, a book that felt like I was, speaking the truth to myself
Mm.
and telling the truth about a place as complicated as Mississippi.
Yeah, and I mean it's a long time, isn't it? And it's also, I know it's a thing that people's second book is often a kind of tricky one anyway, and it must be particularly tricky if there's such a kind of, if for starters, if you have the wonderful gift of the first book being such a huge hit, but then also wondering how you're going to follow that up and trying to find the right story. Have you had other kind of attempts in between which haven't worked out?
I was always dedicated to telling this story, but I
Mm.
definitely had some false starts. And I think really when I first sat down to write the Calamity Club, I told myself that I was going to write a really short, simple story, which it is not.
No, it's quite, I think it's fair to
It
say it's quite a doorstop. I mean, actually,
it
this is a slightly
is.
smaller version than the one I had because I had a
I
soft
know because
proof.
that's right, you had the arc.
Yeah, which was really fat. It was like one of those ones
It
that's
was
actually kind of
really
quite heavy to
fat.
hold when
Yeah,
you're sitting in bed reading it.
that's right. And what I discovered was even though I told myself I was going to write this really short, simple tale about Mississippi during the 1930s, it didn't help that I was really adamant on not writing another story that drew the same kind of criticisms that The Help did.
Yes, I was going to come on.
Being
I was going to come on to
a
that in a minute. Yeah.
yeah, being a white woman from Mississippi, definitely raised some eyebrows to be writing in the voice of those Black characters. And so I told myself, you know what, I did that. I have no regrets about doing that. But I want to do something different now. And I think what I ended up with was, way back, this was probably 10 years ago, was kind of a bland, heartless version of what is now the Calamity Club. And I finally, through many life experiences, had to just finally admit and come to terms with the fact that you cannot write a book about Mississippi where injustices are baked into daily life
Mm,
and not write about hypocrisy and racism and sexism
yeah.
and all the absurdities that come along with that.
Yeah, I mean, what I really loved about the Calamity Club, and a lot of the people watching this won't really know very much about it, so we should talk a bit about the book. I mean, for starters, I found it completely unputdownable. I started reading it, and it was one of those ones where my husband kept going, "Really turn the light out," and I was like, "Well, no, no, just a bit more," because I think, like in The Help, I was discussing this with Jen before we came on. I think your structure is brilliant. I mean, I'm also a writer. I was a journalist editor for many years,
Absolutely.
and I think that the craft in the way that the story is told and the way it unfolds and where we meet the people and as we get to know them before they're suddenly all kind of thrown into this kind of crazy scene which kind of builds up, I think is really clever because you really care about them all and understand why they do something which feels a bit desperate because you're already in their kind of characters and you're very worried about what's going to happen. At the centre of it is a little girl called Meg, whose mum disappears. And I think we're all desperate for that to work out. And I also think that there's some clever parallels between in the kind of the people who often pretend to be the most moral often don't really turn out to be that way. I mean, I think that the performance of kind of moral hypocrisy in the book, in the woman who's running the orphanage, who's actually completely ghastly and pretty evil, is I think a really quite interesting kind of parallel and kind of parody of some of the things that we see going on in the world at the moment. Was that kind of intentional?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the facades that women put on, not necessarily with bad intentions in the
Hmm.
South, but maybe often like just as a means to make everyone around them feel more comfortable. But these facades, and these the idea of polite society, and not being honest with yourselves or others, that's always a theme in the American South. But like The Help, when I wrote the Calamity Club, I had the same intentions, and that was to write a story about what happens when you put together a group of scrappy, intelligent, women, all with a rich sense of humor, all at the very end of their ropes in a place as complicated as Mississippi. And, in
Yeah.
this story, it was a very deliberate intention that there were no men coming to help these women,
No.
no husbands, no fathers, and certainly no government programs. And from this desperation, bottom of the barrel, these women come up with a terrible, awful, but very profitable idea to make money. Um, as you said, the story is told in two voices. So we've got Meg, who's an 11-year-old girl living in an orphanage, and partly because of her own sass, her own smart mouth, her own intelligence, she finds herself unadoptable. And then the other part of the story, the second voice, is Bertie Calhoun, who is unmarried, is from the Delta, which is a very rural part of Mississippi, and they come together in Oxford, Mississippi, which is where the University of Mississippi is. And their lives kind of intertwine. And I wrote a story where these two narrators' lives are apart, and then they come together, and then they move apart again, and their storylines kind of drift together. And I don't know if you can see my hands, but I'm doing that
Yeah.
thing that
They
where
kind of,
we're
yeah, they
weaving together two voices in a story that um, at the end, they crown, and the
but
story.
you're never sure all the way through whether it's going to be okay or whether it isn't. And I'm not going to give it away because I think it is such a kind of page turner because you care so much about both of them and you really want it to work out, but the odds against a happy conclusion are absolutely mighty. So I think that it's really, I think that the way that the tension is built through it is really masterful. But I also think it gives us a great kind of window into the kind of the stratifications of that society, the different kind of pressures kind of working on the different people and the desperation also of the depression and just how there you're right that there's no one coming to save you. There's no that that there's certainly no kind of big brother handout. There are no kind of knights in shining armor coming to rescue anybody. And I think that the kind of the desperation, but also the ingenuity which comes out of that is really fun and surprising. And I also think it gets you into some interesting territory. So I think it's fair, so one of the women involved is a prostitute. And so I think, and one of the women is a kind of young doctor who's just beginning to think about kind of women's health. So I think that that also has a very kind of modern, a kind of modern parallel, given what's been going on with kind of, abortion rights being kind of pushed back and all of those kind of things, and still a huge discrepancy between the kind of amount of money and resources put into men's health compared to women's. And so I was interested in your the depiction of this woman who's a kind of early doctor interested in the kind of looking after women who are seen as not in polite society, and I was interested in how you became kind of fascinated by that, what the origin of that character was.
So the character of Virginia Cunningham is a young woman who wants to be a doctor and is living at a time, this is 1933 in Mississippi, when there just were only a handful of female doctors in the American South.
Mm,
Um, and she was determined. She was working for a doctor while she was getting her education, her undergrad, and she's watching it how these male white doctors are treating women.
mm,
And even worse, if it's a woman of lower class,
yeah,
I mean, women, I don't care what you do for a living or where you are economically on the scale. I mean, women need care that is so different from what men need.
of
And the
course.
way that these women were treated by these doctors was just inexcusable. And so Virginia put her mind to it that she was going to become a doctor in this world and start her own practice for women. And I had lots of fun putting her together because, she was the first, but she's also fictitious, but she represents, like Elizabeth Blackwell, who was the first, woman in America known to be the first doctor, and just the braveness. And meanwhile, I talk about 1933 almost as if the year itself is a character. But the truth
Mm,
is, I chose that year very deliberately because it was before penicillin, came along and was widely used. So that if you were in a risky profession, like if you, were a prostitute, but even if you weren't,
mm,
if you picked something up, if you picked up a sexually transmitted disease like syphilis or gonorrhea, you are in real trouble and you might die. And
yeah,
there was not a lot of care for women. It was really only the men, and that was only because they wanted to protect their soldiers. The
yeah.
men that had gone off to fight World War One and had picked up things along the way and then pass them on to women. But they seem to blame the women for these
Yeah.
diseases and for propagating these diseases, which is completely unfair.
Yeah, no, I thought the depiction of that kind of early kind of state of medicine, because it was particularly well done. And it's cool, of course, something that we can slightly take for granted now, that there are antibiotics and contraception, and that the stakes are not so high now. If you decide if you have sex with someone and then you think, oh gosh, that was a bit of a mistake, at least you're not going to die from kind of syphilis or gonorrhea or kind of a pregnancy that you don't want.
Right. And we take these things for granted. And dare I even say that until a few administrations ago, we took women's rights, women's sexual health, I feel like in America for granted. And right now we are facing a time when we better fight for what we've got because we are seeing that we can lose those rights just very easily and very quickly. I don't really talk about politics much, but women's rights in sexual health is something I feel very strongly about.
I think it's really interesting also for kind of our generation. I think we're about the same age, that
Right,
the
yeah.
um how I think as a generation we took this forward march of progress for granted.
Hmm.
In all of my, I was born in 1970, I'm 55. So in all of that time, we've seen things getting progressively better. More rights for
Yeah.
women, certainly here in Europe and in the UK, better kind of parental leave, better kind of health outcomes, all those kind of things. And suddenly it feels like after kind of 50 years of kind of progress in our lifetimes, if I look back at, my mother or my grandmother, it feels that that has kind of come to a stop. And I don't know about you, but I always felt that we would be a kind of wave that got a certain way up the beach and that my daughters and the women who came after us would get further. But now I'm not so sure about that. I feel maybe that our wave is kind of, the farthest it's going to get for a while, and the people behind us are going to have to keep pushing to get to that point. I'm interested to hear what you think about that.
Well, I mean, we are seeing that, Roe v. Wade was reversed um, based on a case in Jackson, Mississippi, where an abortion clinic, stood strong, and it resulted in the administration voting, or the Supreme Court voting, to give back each individual state the right to decide about choice. So we're seeing progress actually being, taken away from us
Backwards.
as
Yeah.
women. And so it's really happening here. Um, I don't know what the situation is in the UK, but use us as an example, please.
Yeah, I think it's very shocking. I think it's very shocking to a lot of women here in the UK as well, who kind of felt that we were on a similar kind of path towards some kind of progress or equality with our American sisters, to discover that a kind of Handmaid's Tale kind of scenario seems to be unfolding a bit over in the US.
We assumed we were safe, and that was a mistake.
Yeah.
Um, but also, I hope I hope that despite the fact that this book talks about some very dark, very important topics, um, racism and sexism, homosexuality, women's health,
All the big
um,
ones.
all the big ones. Like, I just think, oh my gosh, there really is no issue that is safe in one of my books at this point. Um, I also really tried to give these characters hope.
Yeah.
I want to make it clear that a 11-year-old Meg, who is in an orphanage and finds herself unadoptable, she still somehow has this light inside of her, this hope. And one of the ways that she keeps that flame lit is she has the poem, that the Emily Dickinson poem, that she says to herself, hope is the thing with feathers that perches on the soul. And it's one of my favorite verses that, I just, I want the reader to also feel that hope, a thread of it throughout the story.
No,
And hopefully also get some laughs,
No, it's
because
really funny. I mean, it's I think it's a great page turner. It's very funny. I think it has lots of kind of wise things to say about kind of hypocrisy and about morals as well. But I think it's definitely not a heavy read. It's good fun. People are gonna enjoy it. They're not gonna want to
and
stop reading it.
life is funny. Even like in my darkest moments, I've found something to laugh about, just to keep me sane.
Yeah.
As a Mississippian, as a mother, and as a writer.
Yes, no, I get that. And I think you've always been very clever at coming up with a good hook. I mean, Hope is the Thing with Feathers has always been one of my favorite poems. In fact, I remember my daughter kind of coming back from school saying she had to learn a poem when she was about 7, and it was one of the first things that she ever learned. So it's a great
Oh,
family favorite for us. So it was one of the things that really kind of chimed with me in your book. But I can also remember, I mean, I think you have a real knack of kind of slipping into the kind of crevices of women's lives. Because I can also remember being on holiday with my daughter, it was just the two of us, and we watched The Help. and the you're the thing in the help, which you as smart, you as brave, you as important, whatever. That bit became a kind of big. That also became a kind of family joke, so slightly subverted in our household. But I think that you've been very good at kind of capturing kind of some of the kind of the essence of things. And I think it's true that we do need to remain hopeful, particularly in dark times. I think it's also true that women have more resource often than they know. And it's often when women come together that they're capable of more than they think. I mean, our community Noon that I run and I founded a few years ago, we're all about trying to tell a more positive story about women in midlife. We talk about queenagers. That was my word,
Yes,
a
I
kind of
love that.
rebranding of this point in a more kind of optimistic way, because I feel very strongly that there's been a narrative that things kind of come to an end for women when they kind of get to about 50. And what we're trying to say at Noon is that it's like a figure of eight. It's the end of the first circle and the beginning of the second circle. It's not the end of everything. It's more like that kind of infinity loop, which keeps going. But I think because of the gendered ageism and the culture and the way that women have been perceived, too often we feel like when maybe our kids leave home or a first career ends or something like that, we feel like we're done, and actually we're not. It's just the beginning of something new. So I wonder if that chimes with you and kind of coming back with this amazing book at this point in your life as a queenager.
I mean, it just happened to be, yes, that is the case. When you talk about um, the way that women are perceived in midlife, I don't know who started that rumor that life is over, but I can only imagine that it wasn't women, you know. I mean,
Yes.
someone like put this label on us that maybe our purpose is over, and we know that is not true.
Yes.
Um, so I love that, the Queenager. It's really been a joy. It was a joy to write the Calamity Club when I had a child in my home. My
Mm.
daughter is now 22. She was 11 years old when I was writing this.
Wow.
So I could very much, kind of use her as a source of inspiration. And now that she went to college, she went to Trinity in Dublin and graduated in literature. And, uh, and now she's, off living her life. And so, you for many of us, I'm 57, like I have my life back.
Yes.
When she went off to college, I had all this time that I didn't have otherwise. And as much as I love her and miss her, um, that felt like a gift for
Yeah.
me. So
I know. I
yeah,
think
this
it's
has been the most productive era of my life.
No, I think that that's so true, and it's so lovely to hear you say that, because what we're trying to do is to kind of get that message kind of out there more. I mean, I became interested in particularly in midlife because I worked for 25 years at the Sunday Times of London. I was the editorial director and editor of the magazine. Did a lot of
Oh,
interviews.
oh,
I did a lot of interviews there.
amazing.
So yeah, I not my
Wow.
first rodeo on the interview front. I've interviewed everyone from, Sheryl Sandberg to the Dalai Lama via prime ministers and,
That
Charlton
is
Heston. That was
amazing.
my
You've been
kind of
around the
first
block,
career.
girl.
That was my first career. So, but what I'm interested in is that sense of things coming to an end, and then this new flowering. And I've the same. I also have a daughter who studied literature, who's 23, and
Ah,
in fact she's just back. She's doing a seminar in the other room, tutoring somebody. But I know that thing of them having gone, and suddenly you have so much more. There's so much more space in your life. There's so much more time. And so I think that it's really important to get across to women that actually this freeing up of time and energy and possibility, I think we get a great kind of second kind of like career professional spurt. I see lots of women also kind of going, we did a big piece of research and lots of people going, this is my time, this is finally my
yeah,
turn. I've been looking after everybody
it's my
else, and
turn.
this
And
is when
a
I get
lot
to
of
do something for me.
people were able to do that during COVID because, they didn't have to go into the office and they didn't have you were forced to just stay home, and so many people were creative. But I think for a lot of mothers, we found ourselves not able to create because we
Mm.
were so worried that everybody else in our life might not be okay. I mean,
Yes.
my daughter was at home, and I had to worry about, was she okay? My partner at the time was home. I had to worry, is he okay? And so you're right. Like all that is past us, college is past us, and it's our time.
Yeah, and I think that that's important. And I also think as a kind of we're a pioneering generation in that way that there haven't been because of the extension of lifespan. We're now living twice as long as people did
That's
100
right.
years ago, and we're quite likely 9 in 10 of us are likely to live till our mid 90s, who are kind of around now. So with that in mind, the 100-year life, we called our organization Noon because in the 100-year life, 50's halfway through, it's lunchtime.
I love it. Okay. I love
So,
that.
so that sense of this being a kind of possible time, I think is also reflected in the book because a lot of those women feel like they're a bit washed up or they're kind of at the end, and then they suddenly get this incredible kind of breakthrough, which is then life transformative for loads of them.
Yeah, I mean, there's women of all ages in the book, from 11 years old until Mrs. Tart is in her 60s.
Mm,
Um, and yeah, you're seeing these people experience the Great Depression,
yeah.
and all the kind of terrors of that. You get to see all kinds of and ages of people experience all these different issues. Um, but I do this thing when I'm writing a story, and I ask myself, what is the worst thing that can happen to a character?
Mm,
And very often it's so different for like Meg, who's 11, and the answer is so different for Frances, who's 22 and a
mm.
socialite. And obviously the answer is so different for Mrs. Tart, who's in her 60s.
Yeah.
So
No, I think that kind of span of life is interesting. I'm also interested in there was some kind of pushback on the help as we started talking about when you first came on about writing in the kind of voices of some of the kind of the black women. And it's interesting because I think, back then that wasn't when you wrote that, no one was really kind of thinking in that way. Would you have been able to write the help now?
I don't know, but I honestly don't know the answer to that. If I could have written it, and I don't know if it would have been published, but what I do know is I don't regret writing it.
No,
I
no, for
mean,
sure not.
and when I went on tour for the help, just so many people came to talk to me. They wanted me to understand that despite the fact that there was criticism and people were not altogether comfortable with the fact that a white woman had written in these black voices, they wanted me to know that the book caused them to have conversations,
Mm,
uncomfortable conversations sometimes, that they would not have had otherwise.
yeah,
And just knowing that maybe somehow I instigated some of those conversations, because I feel like for so many decades, people just were not talking about race.
yes.
Certainly not in the American South. They weren't talking about race. And I felt, and it was still such a issue. It's such
Mm,
a problem. The disparity was just, there was still so much unfairness and racism, and yet no
yeah.
one's talking about it. And that's the only way to start healing from a problem, is to talk about it. Um, and I'm also a really strong believer in that, to be like a conscientious human being, to be an empathetic human being, we have to try to understand what it feels like to stand in someone else's shoes.
Yeah,
Now,
I would say that that was the absolute point of fiction. I'm an Oxford English
yes.
English graduate. That was, and until kind of quite recently, the point of a novelist was to inhabit the heads of people who weren't them.
And I don't mean that it necessarily has to be people that you feel sorry for or that are down on their luck or having a hard time. I think it's important for people to try to imagine what it feels like to be successful people, as
Mm.
well as people that are suffering, going through like their worst trauma in life. We have got to open our minds and our hearts and just try to understand what other people are feeling so that we can, learn more about our own selves.
Yeah, and the point about the novelist is to be that kind of empathetic kind of presence, isn't it? It's to be interested in what's going on in other people's minds, to tell different
I
kinds of
just I
stories.
just want to open the door. I'm just the doorman to show the reader what it feels like to exit your life for a moment and stand in the shoes of someone else.
But when you were writing this book, you were careful not to kind of go back into help territory.
Well, I'd already told that story. I'd already
Yeah,
done
sure.
that. And I did quite a lot of research of Oxford, Mississippi, 1933, and there was just not a lot of integration that I could
Mm.
find. I could have missed something, but there was, the neighborhoods were still very segregated. Jim Crow laws were still very much in existence. So for me to integrate a story between blacks and whites, I did the best I could. Charlie, who is Meg's mother, has a close relationship with the woman, that she, smokes cigarettes with and gossips with, and they have good long talks about men and life. Her name's Ophelia, and she's a woman of color. And, I tried to kind of break down those barriers between some characters. But no, it's
Yeah, and
it's
you
not
do
the
that
help.
during the kind of during the denouement. There's a character who's kind of black there who doesn't look black, but actually is, and when people find out her kind of birth certificate, look up her documents, that's problematic for her, of course, isn't it?
Yeah, passing was certainly a very complex issue, because uh, from what I was told, in interviews and from what I've read, if you were black, um, and you looked white, you didn't quite fit in anywhere.
Yeah,
And the Calamity Club, I mean, if it has any kind of theme, it's, found family. It's like
yeah.
people that just don't feel like they fit in life. They don't relate to sometimes their own families, and they all find each other and create this little society.
Yeah, I mean, we love it from a noon perspective because a lot of what we do, we create these noon circles, and we have them around the UK, and we have lots of kind of women supporting women's groups. So you could say that the whole of noon and our kind of Queen Ages is like a kind of, like Calamity Club, but without maybe some of the some of the things which are going on there. But
That's
certainly that
right.
sense of kind of solidarity and mutual support and having each other's backs when, when the cavalry aren't coming, we're definitely we can definitely relate to that.
Yeah, here's the sisterhood.
Oh, Catherine, I'm so grateful to you for coming to talk to us. I know that you're off on a kind of massive kind of world tour for this book. Are you excited about it? Has it all begun, or are you a bit trepidatious? Has it been published in the States yet?
Not yet, but
Right.
I don't know when this is going to be aired, but it comes out next week.
Okay,
And
yes, this will
so
be aired on the 21st of May. We're speaking at the end of
yes, May
April, so it comes out
21st
in the
comes
States
out in
first.
the UK. Yeah, that's so
And
exciting.
and you've already been for supper with Oprah, I noticed on your Instagram.
I did. I had supper, yeah, with
What was that
some.
like?
It was incredible. And I just like the most incredible part was not just Oprah, it was being with Virginia Evans, who wrote the correspondence,
Mm.
and uh, Ava Grebe, who her book came out yesterday. And just, I mean, it was just like, I was just shocked and stunned by the people that I was sharing, I was breaking bread with. It was incredible. It was humbling.
And what does it look like? What will the next few weeks look like for you? You're coming here to the UK, are you?
Yes, I'm coming to the UK in June. And I'm doing some events in London, in Bath, in Scotland, and in Dublin, and then I kind of fan out to a few other countries. So I'm excited.
Wow, really exciting. It's such a strange thing being an author, isn't it? It must be for you that you spend so many years kind of sitting at home, kind of, writing away, and then suddenly you're expected to kind of go and be Mrs. kind of
I
World Tour.
know. I know. It's I'm much more comfortable at home, I'm not
No, I
but I
always feel
think
a
it'll
bit sorry
be
for authors because they're often quite introverted and then they're
that's
expected
right.
to kind of go and
Same.
speak at festivals or do all this kind of thing, which is probably the worst thing for you.
I know you just put the hat on and do the song and dance but really it's worth it because sometimes you connect with readers so
Yeah.
well. And that makes it all worthwhile.
And do you have an idea for the next book?
I do not. Um, Once I finish tour and come home and get quiet again, uh, let's hope the ideas come.
Well,
I
maybe on
hope
your
they
world tour,
do. I,
you'll see something new. I'm so
yeah.
grateful to you for coming to talk to us at noon. I know
Oh,
that the Queenagers are gonna love this book. I really did. It's a great one for your summer sun lounger or just for, a treat for a bit of kind of switching off at night. And I also think it would make a great movie.
thank you.
I think
Thank
you
you. We'll
write in a
see.
way which feels very cinematic. So fingers
All
crossed
right.
we'll also get that.
All
I know
right.
that you've
Thank
got
you,
many,
Eleanor.
many things to do. So thank you so much for joining us and good luck with it all.
Thank you. Maybe I'll see you in London.
Yeah, no, I'd love that. We'd love to come and see you. And this is my book. It's called Much More to Come, which is
Oh,
which was
fabulous.
a Times bestseller and is all about moving into a new chapter in midlife, the kind of mayhem and magnificence of midlife and queenager.
Excellent. I love it. I'll look for that.
Thank you. But yeah, it's a real pleasure to talk to you, and I'm great. I'm really glad that you're on board with our Queenager movement.
I love it. I'm part of it. Let's go.
Thank you so much. Lovely to talk to you.
Thank you, Eleanor. Bye.
Cheers.